Hello and welcome to TRT World. I'm Jafar Hasnan coming to you live from Damascus. Bashar al-Assad's regime fell apart in a matter of days, but Syrians have endured immense suffering over the past 54 years. While they celebrate the end of the regime, they're acutely aware of the significant challenges ahead locally, regionally and internationally as they rebuild their country. The major cities such as here, the capital Damascus, Aleppo, Homs and Hama, once economic hubs, now face monumental rebuilding efforts. The war in Syria has left the economy and infrastructure in ruins after schools, hospitals and residential areas were targeted during the conflict. Despite the challenges, there is a renewed sense of hope. The determination of neighboring countries to support the new Syria in its reconstruction and development is both strong and openly expressed, offering a brighter future. Now, Syria's economy shrank by 85% during nearly 14 years of civil war, with gross domestic product declining from $67.5 billion in 2011 to only $8.98 billion in 2023. As Syria's economy was collapsing during the war, the regime began to rely on drug trade to maintain its finances. Another huge stash of Captagon pills has been found in a security compound that belonged to Assad forces in Damascus. Now, Captagon is a drug that has become a particular problem in the Gulf, with the Assad regime having been the main supplier of this drug, generating billions of dollars. TRT World's Ubaida Hito has sent us this report about this drug trafficking. Let's have a look.
Captagon, a powerful stimulant that has made headlines across the globe. Produced in factories like this one in rural Damascus's Douma. The global trade volume of Captagon is estimated to be $10 billion annually.
In 2010, this building was a potato chips factory. It was confiscated by the regime in 2017 and purchased by Amer Taisir Hayati in a public auction. That's when it was changed from a chips factory to a narcotics production facility. It was owned by Amer Hayati and Meher al-Assad. They put officers from the 4th Division in charge and wouldn't let anyone come near.
Large sections of the factory were set on fire as the Assad regime's 4th Division began retreating from Damascus. Parts of the production line are still evident, including a charred pill press and bags for packing the product. Underneath the warehouse, thousands of pills were left behind, most of them packed and ready to be shipped. Millions of dollars worth of Captagon pills, a drug produced by the Assad family and sold into international markets to fund their war against the Syrian people for more than a decade. Originally developed in the 1960s for medical use, Captagon requires mixing dangerous chemicals and specialized equipment to extract the final product. Cheap production costs and a huge demand for the drugs in the Middle East made it a convenient way for the Syrian regime to make money as it felt the pressure of international sanctions.
These are all precursor chemicals that they used to produce the drug. The next day after the regime fell, we were surprised to find this drug production facility. We thought it was just military here. We found plastic fruits filled with pills and electronic equipment. Amer Hayati and Meher al-Assad were partners in this business and were sending this drug to Saudi Arabia and other parts of the world.
The new government has placed guards at the factory to ensure no one comes close. Anas Muhammad says Meher al-Assad would visit this particular factory personally.
Captagon is a poison that Mahir used to destroy our youth. He would also give it to the soldiers. He used to export to Saudi Arabia and other countries. Many large shipments have been intercepted, even though he tried very hard to hide them.
The United States has sanctioned nearly a dozen individuals and entities that are thought to be involved in the illicit narcotic production. They say the Assad family business was not only making them rich, but securing funding for both the killing of Syrians and Lebanese Hezbollah's own terror operations. Ubaida Hito, TRT World, Damascus, Syria.
Now, just northeast of Damascus, there's a small town called Adra. Officials there have discovered a new mass grave, and this morning, TRT World's Bassem Buneni went to see it for himself, and he joins me now live. Bassem, tell me, what are you seeing over there?
What is really interesting, Jafar, is to see that when a mass grave unfolds, people are really hopeless and they start digging in the whole area. They are really hopeless, but they do believe that they can still find some mass graves. Absolutely astonishing to see, of course, the digging, the holes in all the area here, and people still hope to find mass graves, even when there is a lack of information, of details regarding these mass graves. Today's mass grave here in Adra is thought to have people buried here from the prison of Adra, and that's why the United Nations offered its assistance, its support to this operation. The United Nations is stressing that there is a vital need to protect evidence in order to hold criminals accountable for their crimes. But there is still a way for hope for all those people still willing to know about their beloved ones' fate, even if they are still missing, and even the figures are not accurate. It might range between 100,000 and 150,000, and this will be a major challenge for the new administration here in Syria. It offered protection for all those who can help, who can provide it with information, whether for secret prisons or mass graves.
And Bassem, every other week we are hearing about new mass graves here in Syria. I wonder whether or not there's an estimate of how many more mass graves could be there.
Unfortunately, this might need more technologies, including maybe satellite imageries. What is sure here, or let's say a known secret, is that the Assad's regime committed widespread killings, extrajudicial killings. So the numbers could be very high, even beyond imagination, because even during the war, the administration collapsed in many regions, so documentation was really poor, even for those who passed away from natural reasons. So it will take time before unfolding all mass graves and all the truth about Assad's crimes.
That's TRT World's Bassem Buneni live for us from Adra near Damascus. Bassem, thank you very much indeed. And now with the discovery of these mass graves, it's clear that Syria is psychologically scarred from years of war, while the physical examples of chaos are still very clear. And now TRT World's Noor Kormosh is just back from Idlib in northern Syria, and he's here with me now in Damascus. Noor, now you're one of the few journalists here in Syria who got the opportunity to travel across the country. You were here during the war. Tell me, what is that one story that stands out for you?
Well, actually, if you want to talk about the stories and the impactful stories of what's happened and is still happening in Syria, there are thousands and millions of stories to be told. And I always say that there are millions of stories in Syria to be told for hundreds of years to come. But there was this one particular moment I still remember when the opposition forces took control of the city of Aleppo. We've seen this old man walking all the way from one of the villages called Al-Mansura towards the city of Aleppo, walking, and he told us that he vowed to himself that he would walk all the way from the refugee camp where he was displaced to the city of Aleppo, which was very impactful for the people there and for me personally.
And certainly when we look ahead now, of course, one of the biggest challenges facing the country is rebuilding efforts. You know, when I crossed the border from Turkey into Syria and coming to Damascus, I saw so much destruction, especially in cities like Aleppo, even in the outskirts of Damascus. You can see a lot of destruction. Of course, it's hard to figure out whether or not this destruction happened in the start of this civil war, or it happened in the immediate aftermath of the opposition-led offensive. But again, the interim government here is facing a huge challenge. When it comes to rebuilding efforts, what can you tell us about the damage this country has seen in the past 13 years?
Well, the damage is immense, and all the local and international agencies actually are still witnessing the massive destruction that was caused by Assad forces and its allies. And I've been to Aleppo, I've been to Homs, to Hama, to Damascus, and the amount of destruction is actually insurmountable. I've seen the old neighborhoods in Aleppo, which go back hundreds of years old, are completely destroyed. I've been to the countryside of Damascus, and entire area of the countryside of Damascus, over 90% is still uninhabitable. I've been to the southern countryside of Idlib, and almost 90% of its countryside is uninhabitable. And actually, one of the scenes that I've witnessed in the city of Ma'arat al-Nu'man, which is, as a city, is considered larger than the city of Idlib, we've witnessed how Assad regime forces tore down ceilings to steal the iron roads that was used during the construction process. And now Syrians, as the interim government, are facing immense challenging in the rebuilding process. And I don't think that even the locals here are still talking about it's not going to happen without international and the neighboring countries' support to Syria and to rebuild Syria.
Indeed, and we have already seen Ankara pledge support to the new administration here in Syria when it comes to rebuilding efforts. Now, apart from reconstruction, another major challenge this country is facing is the remnant of Assad regime. For example, there are still many unexploded mines across the country, and certainly that is having a huge impact on the mental health of the civilians of the country. I know that you have filed a report on this very issue. Let's have a look at Noor's report.
For over a decade, 75-year-old Mahmoud has called this camp her home. She tries to remain hopeful despite immense hardships. Like thousands of others unable to return to their towns, she endures life in a torn tent that barely shields her from the harsh weather.
We don't have a place to call home now. They've destroyed our houses and even took the iron rods from the ceilings. Our villages are still not safe to return to. You might step on something and explode at any second.
Unexploded bombs and grenades lie buried beneath the rubble of homes and streets, making entire towns uninhabitable. The fear of death keeps families in displacement camps, unable to return to the peaceful lives they once knew. Since the fall of the Assad regime, the number of explosions caused by such scattered munitions has significantly risen. These explosions have claimed the lives of over 55 civilians, including women and children, while leaving many others with life-changing injuries.
Our neighbor went to his village to collect firewood to warm his children in his tent. They still live in the tent because their house is also destroyed. While he was gathering wood, something fell on his head and exploded. He died instantly. Now his wife and kids are all alone.
Over 2 million internally displaced people remain in the camps. They are still unable to return home.
We are so tired of living in this tent. We had everything in our homes, but these remnants of war continue to kill us. We urge the world to help us return and rebuild our destroyed homes.
According to the Response Coordination Group, only 2% of the IDPs have returned to their partially damaged houses. This leaves 98% still living in refugee camps and torn tents, waiting for a change that will allow them to return to their homes after years of displacement.
Humanitarian organizations are working relentlessly to facilitate the return of the people. The White Helmets say the unexploded ordnance poses a long-term threat to civilians, endangering lives and livelihoods for generations to come.
The danger of unexploded weapons ordnance that was caused by Russian and Assad targeting is still here and is still endangering the lives of people and stopping them from returning to their homes, even the places with different sects. Our teams are still working on detecting the places spread with mines and unexploded weapons ordnances and removing them so we can build a safe place for Syrians.
The longing to return home remains, but the risks are too high. A most potent danger lies beneath in the form of the explosives, and until the land is cleared, the tents are their only refuge for the displaced. The TRT World, Idlib, Syria.
Now, 13 years of conflict here in Syria has reshaped the country's socio-economic landscape, leaving deepest scars on its population and infrastructure. Millions of people are displaced both within and outside of Syria. The war has reduced the country's GDP to less than 49% of what it was in 2010, the year before war broke out. The damage to infrastructure alone is estimated to be worth $117 billion, while exports have plummeted by 92% since 2010. Around 7 million Syrians are internally displaced, with another 5.6 million refugees abroad. It is the largest displacement crisis since the Second World War. Turkey, Lebanon and Jordan are host to most of the refugees. And more than 70% of hospitals here in Syria are non-functional or have been repurposed for military use. The healthcare crisis has left some 12 million people without access to essential services. Mortality rates are rising due to the lack of medical resources and supplies.
Steps for reconstruction must begin with rehabilitating infrastructure and providing essential services, such as water and electricity. After that, they can start working on rebuilding of the destroyed areas. Today, approximately half of Syria is in ruins, and starting reconstruction early encourages and facilitates the voluntary return of displaced people and refugees.
One of the most important priorities for reconstruction in Syria is securing housing for residents whose homes have been destroyed and moving them from camps to proper accommodations. Their daily needs must also be provided until they can return to their homes.
The most critical issue currently is assisting displaced people living in camps to return to their homes and ensuring they have decent housing, even temporarily, until their destroyed homes are rebuilt.
Now, the war has also devastated infrastructure, agriculture, industry and service sectors, and getting them back in action will be a monumental challenge for the administration. The estimated cost of rebuilding ranges from $250 billion to $400 billion, more than 60 times last year's official budget. Now, reports indicate that more than half of this will be needed to revive the housing sector. Restoring roads, power plants and communication networks will be critical for boosting economic activity and generating employment. Of the country's 5 airports, only Damascus and Aleppo are operational, and they rely on outdated technology and makeshift solutions. Countries including Turkey, Qatar and Jordan have now pledged support for Syria's reconstruction, with officials already visiting Damascus. The International Monetary Fund has also expressed its readiness to contribute to Syria's rebuilding in collaboration with the global community. All right, for more on this, we can bring in TRT World's Yunus Demirolu, who joins me live from Aleppo. So Yunus, a lot of focus here on the reconstruction, rebuilding efforts, and one thing that really stood out for me about Aleppo is the fact that there are many ghost towns in Aleppo, and that's primarily due to the fact that many people within Aleppo were displaced, and now they're coming back only to find their homes leveled.
That's right, Jafar. The amount of destruction in Aleppo is very appalling, honestly. There are a number of neighborhoods that have been completely abandoned. If they're not destroyed, because the damage is so high and the people of Syria really don't have the means to be able to restore these homes. A lot of them are still staying in tents. And like you said, with its recent liberation, there has been an influx of people, whether it be tourists or the displaced residents, who have come home to check on the status of their old residencies. And like I said, much of it has been leveled, a lot of it has been destroyed, and frankly, they don't have the means to be able to restore some of these large-scale neighborhoods. Aleppo is Syria's most populous city, and the number of displaced people from Aleppo is very high. So there are huge neighborhoods, just a vast amount of residencies that have been completely abandoned. And frankly, even though these people who are coming in, who have high hopes for their country's future, I won't say that they're pessimistic, that they're not pessimistic. The civil war and the war in Syria has made them resilient to many hardships. They do have higher hopes for the country's future, but frankly, they're just trying to figure out how they will exactly push forward with rebuilding their beloved homes and their city.
Yunus, have you spoken to any officials on the ground? I mean, what's the timeline of rebuilding cities like Aleppo? How many months, how many years are we looking at?
That's a very hard question to answer, Jafar. Even for the officials over here, I mean, we're just past 2 weeks of this new interim government, this new state building operation that's been going on. So there are a lot of problems that this new government and the local officials are still trying to solve. Some of the rebuilding projects have been put on a standstill. We're in the historic city center of Aleppo right now. This is what used to be the closed Grand Bazaar of Aleppo. Bear in mind, Aleppo used to be a central point at the Silk Road, which made this city economically a very big trading city whose effect was felt to this day. But the locals and the officials here tell me that during the war here in Aleppo, that a lot of the market was systematically destroyed, so that a lot of the shop owners here would have to flee the country, and they do not have any shops to come back home now. Now that's just one of the historical sites. The Grand Bazaar that stretches about 13 kilometers, that's the largest Grand Bazaar in the world. But over my left shoulder, I'm sure you can see the Aleppo Castle as well, under restoration, the Umayyad Mosque under restoration. Frankly, Jafar, all of the historic sites that I've been to have been badly damaged, and they're under restoration. Now, like I said, because we're in this transitional process still right now, the restoration projects have not continued, but the locals here tell us that they are very aware of the historic importance of the city, the heritage and the history that's in this city, and they're very determined and adamant that they will rebuild the city, even if it will take some time.
Indeed, there's this cautious optimism among the people of Syria. That's Yunus Demiroglu, live for us from Aleppo in Syria. Yunus, fascinating insights. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, following the collapse of the Assad regime, many displaced Syrians around the world are returning home, but they're now faced with the challenge of rebuilding their old lives and their country. TRT World's Tayyib Aiden reports.
Ala Badawi has returned to his home in Damascus after 7 years away. But the house he left behind is now just a pile of rubble.
When the regime fell and Damascus was liberated, we returned. Thank God. But there are no landmarks of traces of the house. We will rebuild it and clear the rubble.
After nearly 14 years of civil war, cities, towns and villages have been destroyed and many landmarks lost. But Syrians are determined to rebuild their country.
The experience that we gained in Turkey, we will implement it here. We will not depend on foreign companies.
The United Nations estimates that the cost of rebuilding Syria will be more than $400 billion. That means it will need financial assistance from the international community, and neighbouring countries like Turkey have promised to deliver. But on top of the damaged infrastructure, the Syrian economy is also in ruins, with spiralling inflation, a plunging currency and crippling international sanctions still in place, while the size of the country's debt burden is still unclear. Syria's economy shrank by 85% during the 14 years of war, declining from $67.5 billion in 2011 to only $8.9 billion in 2023. But with the return of those displaced, internally and overseas, there is hope of reviving the economy. This historic bazaar is now bustling with shoppers. Shop windows display signs offering currency exchange for dollars, euros and Turkish lira, formerly banned under the Assad regime, showing signs the city is coming back to life. And as the new administration gears up to revive the economy, one key question remains. Who will take on the former regime's huge debt? Taiba Aydin, TRT World.
And now let's bring you some latest developments with regards to the new Syrian administration. The new leadership here has launched an operation on Thursday to pursue the remnants of the former Assad regime in the countryside of Tartus province, which is in western Syria. For more on this, let's bring in TRT World's Hassan Abdullah. He joins me live from Azaz. Hassan, what prompted this move?
Well, basically, this particular action was against elements who the authorities say were responsible for the kidnapping, torture and murder of Syrians. So these were very specific individuals they were going after. And when they actually got close to one of the places from where they were going to arrest one of the former regime commanders, this is where they say that they were ambushed, resulting in a number of security forces officials losing their lives. So this was a very specific operation, but after that, after the ambush, they went after those who were believed to be behind that attack on the security forces, and they're saying that they have arrested a number of suspects who they believe were behind it, and they're saying that they're going to continue with this. So it's not after elements of the regime in general, but rather specific people who are responsible for torture and killing of Syrian civilians.
And Hassan, the Turkish Defense Ministry has released a statement in support of the new Syria's administration. What does it say?
That's right. Well, the Turkish Defense Ministry is saying that there's going to be a great collaboration between the Turkish and Syrian sides, especially when it comes to the defense sector, when it comes to ensuring the provision of security. And I've been talking to Syrian officials, and I think you can say that there is consensus on the Syrian side that they really appreciate the assistance Turkey has extended to them. And they're actually hoping for more assistance. And this response from the Turkish Defense Ministry was in regard to that. They've said that collaboration and cooperation between the Turkish and Syrian defense ministries is going to be good not just for the security of the two countries, but also for regional security and stability.
That's TRT World's Hassan Abdullah live for us from Azaz in Syria. Hassan, thank you very much indeed. Now, moving forward, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the occupied Golan Heights will remain part of Israel for eternity. That's amid growing international criticism of Israeli possession of previously demilitarized buffer zone in Syrian-controlled territory. And as the world focuses on helping Syria establish a new government, Netanyahu is using the fall of the Assad regime as an opportunity to increase the number of Israeli settlements in the occupied Golan Heights. TRT World's Mohammed Al-Qasim reports from Mashd al-Shams in the occupied Golan Heights.
The Israeli government approved a plan this month to increase the Jewish population and illegal settlements in the occupied Golan Heights, approving an $11 million plan that would change the demographic makeup of the area. A move that has infuriated residents of the occupied Golan Heights, who say these are not new plans, as Israel has been trying to increase its presence since the early 70s.
Obviously, Israel takes advantage from took advantage from the military conflict in Syria in order to strengthen its control over the Golan and its remaining Syrian indigenous population. and from the other side to increase the Israeli illegal settlers and to expand the Israeli settlements.
Israel occupied most of the Golan Heights, a strategic plateau, in 1967 and annexed the area in 1981. Nearly 23,000 Arab Druze residents live in 4 villages in the occupied Golan Heights and 30,000 Israeli settlers. The Druze community identify themselves as Syrians and has largely resisted Israeli citizenship. In 2019, then U.S. President Donald Trump formally recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. As a gratitude, Israel named a new settlement after him. But Druze residents here are rejecting Israel's plan, saying it's a violation of international law.
The Israelis nowadays, they make ethnic cleansing in the Golan Heights.
Within hours of the fall of the Syrian regime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered troops to seize the demilitarized zone, sending tanks, troops, bulldozers, and heavy equipment into the buffer zone, occupying more Syrian territory. Israel claims that all the steps that it has taken since the fall of the regime are defensive and preventative measures aimed at what it says keeping hostile forces away. Israeli officials, including Netanyahu, claim that these are temporary measures. But actions on the ground says otherwise. The Israeli military looks like it's going to stay in newly occupied Syrian territory indefinitely.
And Mohammed Al-Qasim joins me now live from the occupied Golan Heights. Qasim, let me pick your brain on this one thing here. Is the Israeli occupation model, or strategy rather, in the occupied Golan Heights different from the ones in the occupied West Bank or Gaza, or would you say same story, different country?
That's a great comparison, Jafar. It's the same story. It's the same scenario. Israel takes that scenario from the occupied West Bank, and then it tries to implement it in the occupied Golan Heights. It's right now it's working to increase the number of illegal settlements in this occupied territory. It's occupied according to the international law and international community. It hasn't recognized Israel's sovereignty over it, and also it's trying systematically to increase the number of illegal Israeli Jewish population, illegal settlers in the occupied Golan Heights. It's been trying by building, now it's planning to build an airport, railway system to encourage Israeli citizens, those who want to move here, to move here at low-cost housing, for example, where for the original inhabitants, the indigenous residents, the Druze, they're having difficulties even building on their own land because Israel, similar to what it does in occupied East Jerusalem as well as in the occupied West Bank, it puts extremely strict conditions on building for Palestinians there. Now it's doing the same thing here, and even when it allows residents to build, it's always conditional with many restrictions. So that's why many, if not all, of the residents of the 4 predominantly Druze, Arab Druze villages in the occupied Golan Heights, they're very worried now about their future. They believe that Israel, with Netanyahu at the helm, are trying to change the demographic makeup of the Golan Heights, change its character from being an all Arab residence, all Arab villages, all 4 of them, and bringing in Jewish residents. And that is something that they have been resisting for decades now. But Israeli parliament, that's the Knesset, has approved this month to increase the number of settlers as well as illegal settlers and settlements in the occupied Golan Heights. And looking even beyond the buffer zone behind me here, Jafar, which Israel occupied soon after the collapse of the Syrian regime, Israel has been sending heavy equipment, bulldozers. We just witnessed more soldiers going in overnight, more tanks, and we've seen Israeli tanks roll through many villages beyond the buffer zone by about 6 to 10 kilometers inside Syrian territory, occupying much of it. And many residents here are fearful that Israel will create new facts on the ground on the other side, and by occupying it, it would create new facts by saying that this is Israeli land for the defensive and preventative measures as an excuse, and that they are going to enforce their sovereignty over, like they did here in the occupied Golan Heights in 1981. Jafar?
Mohammed, given the current circumstances in the occupied Golan Heights, how likely is it for Syria's new administration to intervene in the unfolding situation?
At this point, it's highly unlikely, and soon after the collapse of the Syrian regime, Israel carried out one of the largest Air Force campaign, destroying almost 85 of the former regime's army's air defense and radar sites. They went after their fleet, destroying most of it. They've been through many of the military bases beyond even the buffer zone, collecting and taking away the weapons there, destroying much of what used to be a Syrian army, leaving nothing for the coming government, which will leave it without, leave it toothless, without any power, without any ability to challenge Israel. And all that the new Syrian government can do now is try to appeal to the international community, to regional powers or mediators, in an attempt to force Israel to push back and relinquish the territory that it has occupied since December 8, whether it's the peak of Mount Hermon, also to my right behind me, which Israel occupied all of it right now. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did visit the area a couple of weeks ago, saying that Israel will not leave Mount Hermon until the end of 2025, and that's not it's not for sure. He's just said that his troops will stay there at least until 2025, leaving open how long, maybe longer for Israeli forces to stay there. And the same can be said for Israeli territory, for Syrian territories Israel has occupied in the last couple of weeks, saying Netanyahu, his defense minister Israel Katz, and other top Israeli officials said that these are strategic locations, strategic hills that Israel wants to keep for the foreseeable future as a deterrent for what they term as hostile forces, and they don't want to see the weapons that the former Syrian regime's army used to have fall in the wrong hands. And it's going to be extremely difficult for a young government in Damascus to be able to challenge Israel at this time. And all it can do is to reach out to the international community as well as the United Nations, see if they can apply pressure on their own to force Israel to relinquish the territory that it has occupied in the last couple of weeks. Jafar?
That's Mohammed Al-Qasim live for us from occupied Golan Heights. Mohammed, thank you very much indeed. It's clear that Israel continues to conveniently sideline United Nations Security Council resolutions and international law, and the world continues to watch us. Mohammed, thank you very much for that update, and this brings us to the end of our special Damascus Bulletin. I'll be back with you at 14:30 GMT. From me and my team here in Damascus, goodbye for now. Back to you, Yashmin.